Welcome to NFL Daily, where we're taking lessons from how to retire from Brandon Graham. I'm Gregg Rosenthal. I'm in the Chris Wesseling podcast studio. I'm here with my friend Jourdan Rodrigue of The Athletic. And yes, Brandon Graham retired on Tuesday. And one of the last things he did in his career was talk to NFL Daily. What a way to go.
Yeah, I loved that interview too. He brought his kids. His kids answered some questions for us as well. He was emotional. He, at that time, was adamant that he was going to walk into the sunset at that time. So, and he said he probably wasn't going to change his mind. So, man, what an icon. Iconic for the franchise and for our league.
It's so hard to stick a landing. You really appreciate players that are able to do so because it's just so rare. I was thinking of it. We were talking about Travis Kelce and his podcast and just how brutal that loss was for him and how tough it is. If they had won that game, maybe he does retire because he feels like he stuck the landing. And instead, he seems like not only is he haunted in the moment from it, but he's aware that game is going to haunt him probably for the rest of his life, whether he wins another one or not. So you love it when a guy goes out on his own terms. That's what Brandon Graham did. We're going to go through all the news today. There's some fun stuff. And then we're going to get to a segment that Jourdan came up with, things that will matter in December. Things that, have happened so far in this free agency period. We've done a lot of daily news, but we haven't done a lot of looking back. So looking back at what's happened and projecting forward, some of the moves that are going to matter long term. But yeah, we might as well start with Graham. We already started the conversation. He officially retired on Tuesday, and he gave an emotional press conference. Let's listen to the beginning of it.
First, I just want to say thank you to everybody already. Aww. But y'all know I gave everything I had in this. And I don't have no regrets. That's one thing I tell them young boys. Don't have no regrets.
I am thinking of how sometimes in dumb sports talk radio, or even just among friends, a conversation is well, whose career would you rather have? This superstar with the titles, without any titles, or this guy who was kind of a role player but beloved in his community. And to me, I'd rather be the Brandon Graham, an all-time Eagle that stayed there the whole time, has a game-ending Super Bowl moment, literally ends his career coming back from an injury and being part of a great Super Bowl defense. I think I'd rather do that than the money without the championship, because he got plenty of money either way.
And he also got the championships. Right. So he gets both. He is a beloved figure in that community. I remember reading stories a couple years ago about just the work that, he and his wife do in the community and how much of a figurehead they both have been collectively, that family. They are royalty there. And I think that's so wonderful. I think cities like Philadelphia, they do it, if not better than at the highest level of treating their stars like homegrown legends, like heroes, for the right reasons, for the fact that the Grahams have been so invested in the community as well as contributed to this franchise, given Eagles fans some of the finest memories and ultimate highs. And I'll never forget. I'm not an Eagles fan. I enjoy them quite a bit, but watching Brandon Graham walk out to the 50 to midfield for the coin toss as a team captain, and his arm was just loaded up in the biggest plastic, hard plastic brace I've ever seen. And knowing that he was going to go out and actually get some snaps and actually contribute, and he was just going to do it. And that's what you do. And I just think, it's a hard sport. It's a hard league because you don't often get to retire on your terms. You don't get that walk into the sunset moment, but it happens just enough to make people believe in that fairy tale. And sometimes the Brandon Grahams of the world, they do get that fairy tale.
Yeah, and he said in that interview with us on the field, and we'll hear just a small slice of that a little later, that he learned from the first time he lost the Super Bowl to appreciate this, but how difficult this season was, that his family was with him. So for him to get back on the field after having that injury. Just a reminder in terms of player development, when Brandon Graham's first contract ended, he had a total in 5 seasons, because back then, first-round contracts were just 5 seasons. There was no fifth-year option. That's how long he has been in the league. He had 16.5 sacks total. His first 4 seasons, he had 11.5 sacks total. He is a victory story of valuing pressure over just sacks, because he did have a lot of pressure early in his career. And also, like, PFF, I'm going to give them a little nod, because they always had Brandon Graham ranked so high, and people were like, Brandon Graham, really? And the Eagles saw it. They kept paying him. He gets a second-team All-Pro, eventually a comeback player of the year, a couple of Pro Bowls, but ultimately like a Hall of very good guy in terms of the rest of the league, but one of the all-time Eagles. The Eagles were also very active in terms of their moves over the last 24 hours. Lane Johnson got a big raise, which is nice. Just
early,
Like, right. He actually was signed for a couple more years, but this is one where he was pretty low on the tackle list. So they basically just gave him an $8.5 million raise over the next couple of years, because that's what they do, take care of their great guys. And then they also signed one of the highest players left on my top 101, Azeez Ojulari. And I guess you got to cue the soundbite here. Like, say it with me. Howie does it again. All right. I think we did well there. Howie does it again. Just everyone's got to say it.
I said did. Whoops.
It's all good.
I even changed it in the document. Howie does it again and again and again and again. Pay a guy early, get a guy that's going to contribute for them. I mean, it's like the 1-2.
He said something telling, I thought, at one of the press conferences this offseason, where he said, if we're going to bring in guys, like, we want to bring in young guys. The idea of bringing in older free agents from other teams, we're not going to do that as much. Now, he did bring in Adoree Jackson, but that's on just like a 1-year. I think he's thinking about guys in general, their philosophy. If they're going to bring in someone, bring in a guy like Ojulari, who has a chance to rehab his value, who's only 25 years old, so they get another option for a situational pass rusher. One item from one of our friends that popped up over the weekend that I did want to talk about on this show was Myles Garrett speaking to Andrew Siciliano. This is from Andrew's podcast with the Browns called The Best Available Podcast.
In all seriousness, do you know who the quarterback's going to be? I mean, do you have an idea?
After conversations, I do have an idea.
Okay. Do you like the idea?
I like it enough to be here smiling in front of you, because I think we have a good chance of that happening and making the most out of it.
Can you tell us who it is, Myles?
Yes.
You know I can't do that.
Okay, I love that, because Andrew, this is a team podcast. He does great work for that team. And still, he asks these questions. He gets the people what they want, and I love it.
I love it because, and I texted Andrew, and I wouldn't have said his answer if he had an idea. I was like, who do you think he's talking about? He's like, I have no idea. He doesn't know. But he asked those questions because Myles hinted at it a little bit in his press conference that he had a notion. So he thought, oh, that's interesting. That's surprising too. So he followed up. Good job by him. It's now got 1 million views on Twitter or something like that.
It is also the perfect thing to say when you don't want people to think that you went back on your "it's not about the money" thing. For the
okay,
money.
That's a cynical view.
That's a cynical view. I'm just presenting thoughts here, like multiple thoughts.
The close up on his face as he said he had an idea.
I did like the smirk. I liked it.
It did feel like he had an idea. And so I'll ask you, who do you think the idea would be?
I mean, you're putting me on the spot here. I don't know. Do you think they'll trade for somebody, or do you think they'll draft
it's
somebody?
A podcast. We talk to each other. We ask questions about football.
Yeah, I mean, Cam Ward, if they can get up there, if they can get up to that top pick, that would be, to me, the right fit for them.
That would be the only one, if I was Myles Garrett, that would get me excited. That, I think, is the most logical answer. Andrew said he heard from 1 million different people in terms of fans and stuff who all had their own theories and really believed in it. Like, they really believed it was Cam Ward. That one actually does make sense to me.
Yeah.
If you're Myles Garrett and you're like, we're going to make an effort to trade up to 1. Kirk Cousins, I think, would be the next most logical because of the same reasons why he's been connected to the Browns this offseason. Stefanski, the history there. Would that make Myles Garrett smirk and be happy? Maybe, players recognize other players who are good, and maybe he's like, okay, Kirk Cousins actually is a legitimate quarterback. I would be excited about that.
Yeah, in that offense, though, if that Kubiak, the more Kubiak side of the Shanahan-Kubiak tree, unless Kirk Cousins can actually move in a play action or a boot action, like there's actually not much to be excited about there. So, yeah, I think that would be the caveat here. If it's Kirk Cousins, like you got to move in that system a little bit. You got to not just be hurt all year.
Your cynical answer.
I am feeling cynical today. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm normally so joyous.
Well, it's shaking me because I actually now think that's the most logical answer. Because like, how could he even know? But Cam Ward, that would make sense. They're only one spot away. I think it makes sense for the Browns. I don't know why I haven't thought about it that much. And the fact that there's been no Ward Browns buzz actually makes me think it's like even more logical.
It's like the vacuum effect where like they're don't say his name.
Right.
Don't even think about him. And nobody will know.
Because they're the closest team. Those top 3 teams all need a quarterback. He's going to go, I think, first overall to one of those 3 teams. And that'll be a fun topic for the next few months. Let's talk Cam Heyward, who has a podcast called Not Just Football, which had some of our friends on it. Mina Kimes was a guest on it, but this was a different segment. And here is what he said. Talking about Aaron Rodgers.
I ain't doing that or darkness retreat. I don't need any of that crap. Like, either you want to be a Pittsburgh Steeler or you don't. That's simple. That's the pitch. Like, if you want me to recruit, that's the recruiting pitch. You know, Pittsburgh Steelers. If you want to be part of it, so be it. If you don't, no skin on my back.
We are at a funny point in the Rodgers setup that there's a potential of him joining a team that he will know that they weren't his first pick. Like if he joins the Steelers, it was like, well, actually I wanted to join the Vikings, but I settled for you. Like the whole thing is a little bit awkward.
Yeah. And what I appreciate what Cam Heyward is doing, who is like as vintage Steeler as it gets, is he's being vintage Steelers. He's got some pride. He's showing some pride here. Like, hey man, like we are who we are and I like who we are. And if you want to join us, like be about it. Great. And if not, okay, fine. You know, I think that's one of the things missing in some of these, like this groveling that some of these teams have done with the Rodgers cycle, a couple of cycles now, is like, hey, you got to like have a little backbone here. You got to say like, hey, we want you, yeah, but if you don't want to be here, we're not going to try to force a square peg into a round hole, and you're making us wait. So I appreciate that a team is standing up a little bit.
But everyone's too desperate, apparently,
because quarterback matters. Because quarterbacks matter so much, and I do believe that Aaron Rodgers will help a team. That position matters. He will absolutely help a team that he joins. However, the nuance here is there are 52 other players, key players in that locker room, and a bunch of coaches who are all kind of waiting around to put their plan into place and have come up with plans A-, B+, B to adjust. And, you will speak up if you are a player of Cam Heyward's status, and you should.
The longer it goes on, the more believable it is that the Vikings are interested on some level. I don't know. I'm going back and forth with
I believe the Vikings are interested. I do believe that. I believe they're talking about it, and I also believe that the reporting by my great colleagues over the weekend about that this is Kevin O'Connell's decision serves twofold. And this is not insight from me. This is just my perception looking from afar at this entire situation, is sending a message into the sky about who is actually still in charge in that building when it comes to the quarterback. Whether or not Aaron Rodgers joins, it's a subtle message to Aaron Rodgers. That's great that you want to play with us. We're talking about it. This is the person with the power in the building when it comes to the quarterback, and this is the brand of this franchise. It's Kevin O'Connell. And that is making it very clear through that headline, in my opinion, of kind of, hey, you want to come here? Great. This is also something you have to understand.
And I get that, but they got to make a decision too. What are why do they need to take so long?
Well, I think it's smart to assess and analyze and talk with Kwesi, who's killed this offseason, by the way, had a great offseason. And I think it's risk assessment, it's risk management. I think that's the process. If they are really having these conversations about it, you're going to not react emotionally. you're not going to react getting the guy. You're talking through down the road. What happens,
Sure.
The ripple effect of such a decision, you could, if everything goes well, great. If everything goes poorly, if everything goes medium, what happens to JJ? Like all of these different things.
I feel like you could settle that in a day, though. And I get that they had other interests. They did try to keep Sam Darnold. They were involved. They did get into the Daniel Jones
Well,
thing.
you're talking about money too. I mean,
Right.
I don't know. That's a factor too. That's a back and forth conversation. That's not necessarily just an internal conversation. If you're thinking about, okay, how much do you want? No, we're not going to do that. Okay, go back and forth. Maybe he doesn't have cell service again this time. Like
he's in Malibu. They got plenty of cell service. I do think it was a life lesson I learned when I left Pro Football Talk and NBC to come to the NFL. Was the toughest professional decision, or really life decision I had to make up until that point. And I had no regrets about it. The only thing I learned from it, which was maybe part of my own immaturity, was just once it got down to where there were no more things to figure out between the two sides, be decisive, because that indecision is gonna maybe make both sides or make people upset in a way that's unnecessary. It's something I don't think I would have done. Again, not that I was sitting there hemming and hawing for like months or a week or whatever, but I definitely, sat with that decision. I was like, okay, that was a good lesson. Like once you have all the information, make a decision. So I would say the same to the Vikings and the Rod.
Sure. But again, we're looking at it from the outside in. There could be things that they need to know more about.
Yep.
There could be things that he needs to know more about. So we have to caveat that a little bit by saying, like, we only know what we know right now. We certainly don't know the entire situation.
It also, means that other quarterbacks are going off the board, and they don't mind that, or else they would be signing one, the Minnesota Vikings. But Jameis Winston is out there. Like, I thought they were going to sign someone that would have been maybe a little higher tier, and I would include Jameis in that, but it's Jameis, it's Flacco. In theory, it's Russell Wilson. I don't think that's a fit, but it's Carson Wentz. Like that's what we're talking about. It's Teddy. I don't know. Is Teddy just going to play a whole... it's not a higher level of backup. So that's interesting. That's one thing they are possibly losing in this process as time goes on. The Vikings also released Garrett Bradbury. That had been reported that was coming. The former first-round pick who's played a lot of center might end up moving to guard. Patriots are reportedly interested, according to Mike Reese. They signed another former first-round pick, Jeff Okudah, the cornerback who's bounced around a little bit. Speaking of the draft, Tet McMillan from Arizona did run a 40. There was buzz that he might not run at all before the draft, and is his stock falling? He knows he's not going to run very fast, and he does end up running hand-timed, according to the reports there, 4.55, 4.56. When I saw that, I actually thought, okay, that's good enough. There was some talk maybe he would be in the 4.6, 4.7 types, and that's why he wouldn't run. Like, why else would you not run? That said, it is on the slower end. Only a couple wide receivers have had that slow a 40 and gotten taken in the top 15 in the last 15 years or so. Mike Williams, rest in peace, not the one with the Chargers, but the former Buccaneer. And Mike Evans, who obviously has had an incredible career. They were some in the 4.55 range. He is an interesting prospect. Daniel Jeremiah put him 22nd in his latest mock draft. So I think he's someone where, depending on who you talk to, you have very different evaluations of him.
I think that going back to 2023, 31 other teams would have drafted 4.5 second, 7 second 40 time runner Puka Nacua in the first round. Had they had the chance. So I do think that, the past is one thing and there is a very small recency, but if you were going to go back and reweigh some of these players who have been outstanding despite a slow 40 time.
Jake London never ran famously, which means he probably would have been in that area.
I'm also kind of the throw out the 40 in general person, so maybe I'm not the right person to be talking about this, but I do think that if you're going to ask those 31 other teams, they'd be like, including the Rams, they'd say, well, we should have drafted this kid in the first round.
Well, of course, but it's also part of the reason. Part of the reason.
Yeah.
He also had the injuries and everything. But yes, anyone would have taken him rounds and rounds higher. They missed him. My son got a got a Puka poster at the book fair. I'm like, what? They weren't any good books to buy? You just bought a poster at the book fair? You know, I miss the book fair. It's a fun thing. You put like $30 on the gift, the card or whatever. But
I love it.
That's what he got.
You also buried the lead of that story, which is that the Rams have now surpassed the Patriots in Walker's fan rankings.
Yes,
yeah.
They're up to number 2. I was like, you can't buy a poster, bro, if you say you're not even a Rams fan. He's like, I am. They're number 2. Okay.
Did you just do your son's voice? In a deeper voice.
One item that only I'm interested in that I just thought, I read this and I thought it'd be interesting for the NFL Daily audience to hear. The story on The Athletic from Andrew Marchand was about how the ESPN changed their lead director on Monday Night Football. They took the number 2 guy from Fox. That alone I find interesting, but I wouldn't have commented. But they had a quote from ESPN, Brooke Magnus, so they're a big executive there, and he said, quote, I feel like we are not in the same conversation with Fox and CBS relative to our overall game presentation, which is, wow. First of all, I don't even know if that's true. I think the ESPN does a great job. They obviously love their announcers, but they're saying the overall presentation, the directing, the producing, they're not even in the same conversation with Fox and CBS. But the interesting part of that to me is like NBC's clearly the best one, and you didn't even mention them. So are you just not trying to give them credit? Is it just a slip up, or is your judgment so bad that that's just weird quote?
I'd have to hear the inflection of the quote, because if you read it a different way, it would almost sound like they're putting themselves above Fox and CBS. If you read it a certain way.
The context of the article would make it clear that this was a decision he made because he just thought they weren't as good and they wanted a guy. They're gonna have a Super Bowl in a couple years.
My issue, I mean, this is a very selfish issue as a person who's like covering a beat and needs to see like a replay like all the time. Because watching things live goes so fast, you wish you had a replay. Atlanta, by the way, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium has little replay screens in the press box. It's fantastic. Really, really solid. Fox and CBS drive me freaking crazy because they do not show replays fast enough, nor sometimes do they even show them. And are you
talking about the lead crews, or are you talking about like teams 3?
Not the lead.
4?
No, but I'm just saying that should be standard. That should be standard. Give the people the information.
There's only so many resources, so I've thought about that too. You do get a different broadcast with teams 4, 5, 6, 3. You have way more replays on the lead crews. Just a little
which all the crews should have the same number of replays.
Fair.
Democratize.
A lot of cameras. Anyways, that made me think ranking-wise, presentation. Wow. I'm going NBC 1. That's easy.
Of course you ranked them. Oh, my God.
No, I'm doing this off the top of my head. I would have maybe gone ESPN 2, just because maybe it's Troy and Joe, but the overall presentation. I want to get a lot of comments from my friends in the industry on this one. I might have gone Fox, ESPN, then CBS last, because I don't know why. I guess I'm not really smart enough to make this call. Let's finish the news quickly and go take a break. Just some little nuggets before we do that. Ronald Darby, who's bounced around a little bit, signed with the Texans. Juan Thornhill, the former Chiefs safety, to the Steelers. The Saints signed former Ram Jonah Williams. Our buddy Bo Wolf, he's always had a big man crush on Christian Ellis, doing the rare thing where he's taking a restricted free agent visit. You don't see those too often. A special teamer, mostly with the Patriots, visiting the Raiders.
The Bo Wolf pop.
And then international player program star Jakob Johnson still going strong at a position that barely exists in the league many years into his career. Congratulations to him. He is back with the Houston Texans. All right, let's take a break. And on the way out, we will listen to Brandon Graham with us at the Super Bowl.
You've already celebrated one Super Bowl title. What do you learn from that you're going to put into this celebration now?
Well, you know what? Last time I had stood out here just so I could feel it, because you know when you go through adversity, you don't want to run. And I'm so happy that I stuck through it, because now we got the green confetti coming down. And it just feels so much sweeter because we knew what happened last time, and we want to make sure that that didn't happen again.
Back on NFL Daily. It's the middle of March. We're turning our attention towards the NFL draft. Started to watch some tape, as it were.
Woohoo!
Got 40s and free agents coming up next.
I like that show.
Thank you.
So much. One of the main things I like about that show is how DJ puts you in your place sometimes. And his Geno Darnold take was outstanding in my opinion. And I love the video of it because you could see all over your face, like, he is making a great point.
Please. There's more incredulity. Is that how you say that? This is a great segment coming up. And like I mentioned, we're in March. We're going to turn our attention towards the draft soon. But I did want to kind of look back at everything that's happened in free agency. And you came up with this segment that is a perfect way to do that. And it's going to be looking back, but it's also going to be looking forward. What's happened over these last 10 days or so that's going to matter in December? Like, I miss December. In some ways, it gives me like the shakes to think about, like being in the middle of the season.
How many shows will you have done between now and then, Greg?
like that, just because it's so busy and everything. But also, I miss the holiday season. So these are things that are going to matter in December. Why don't you start?
And to further contextualize too, teams make free agency moves. Teams add players to their roster for December.
Yeah,
like this is what free agency really does set up in some ways. Certainly prior to the trade deadline as well, whereas the draft more sets a long-term vision, a long-term foundation. But December, when football becomes real and when teams are starting to wind up to make that playoff push, these are the moves that we think will matter, whether it's free agency, whether it's coaching. These are the things that we think will matter in December.
I especially think that's true and a great point because free agency is a lot about not just depth, but it is about depth. But it's about those mid-tier starters. Mm-hmm. It's not about your superstars. You need to draft those, or in the case of the Commanders, you can trade for them. But that's the exception, a Laramie Tunsil type of trade. Most of these moves have been filling spots with solid, hopefully above average starters. Why don't you get us going?
Yeah, my first one is that I like, and I think it matters in December, that the Green Bay Packers have not overreached in free agency in March. Brian Gutekunst noted early in the offseason that the Packers had like the cleanest / best cap they've had in some time. It sort of made people think that maybe they'd be hyper aggressive in free agency, but they actually made meat and potatoes moves on players they really liked. I like that they didn't overreach or overspend on a bad free agent class. They're giving some of their young guys a little bit of air and a little room to keep growing. And we've seen when Matt LaFleur takes this strategy as a coach to let some younger players develop and grow up a little bit, then it really, really works. And I think they set themselves up to actually hit those premium positions in the draft. They signed Aaron Banks, the guard, who's a system fit out of the 49ers. I think he's a little bit underrated personally, especially when he's in the right scheme. And then corner Nate Hobbs, who, as my colleague at The Athletic, Mike Schneidman, wrote, has a really powerful relationship with Rich Bisaccia. So they did the meat and potatoes thing. They still will have needs. They're going to move on from Jair Alexander. That will free up about $6 million more of cap space. They'll have close to $40 million in cap space after that release. And I think they have 3 picks in the top 100. I think they're going to go receiver, cornerback, and possibly edge. Mm-hmm. And I think that they like working this way. I think they're comfortable with their developmental process with their coaching staff, who has continuity. And
the Aaron Banks signing, which was one of the most surprising to me, just seeing 4 years, $77 million for Aaron Banks. I was surprised, but then you peek under the hood. It's 27 fully guaranteed. It's a signing bonus. The Packers are old school. They do contracts the old way, where they have you sign a big signing bonus, and that's it. And that's it for just in case it's a bust, they would cut him and actually save a lot of money next year. Now, I don't think they will. They have a $10 million or $9.5 million roster bonus that they'll have to make a decision on early in the offseason, next offseason. And if he's just decent, they'll have him on for another year. But then it's a year-to-year move. So once I saw that, it's a little less risky. They don't need him to be a star. They just need him to be solid. The reason why I think all of this matters, specifically for December, is through OTAs and through the summer, especially in a post-Jair world and a post-draft class world, you're going to see where everybody fits together on this roster. And you're going to see really what the plan is. They're taking this very ultra-patient approach where they are stockpiling this money to where, hey, let's say somebody becomes available at the trade deadline who could really help you, and you're better because you've developed these young players together.
and you need to go out and get that person, but also promise them a certain contract. You know, teams often shed players because they're in need of a contract coming up, and you can promise that player said money, and then you roll through November, December. Like, that's why I think this patience really matters for December for the Packers.
And it was very targeted. 2 guys, 2 positions they really wanted to shore up. I really like the Nate Hobbs signing. But yes, if you just do the basic thing, which I did as part of this exercise, which go to NFL.com and look at the notable additions and notable departures. They don't have many additions. It's just like a couple. Whereas a lot of teams, you know, they're filling in a lot of depth, and doesn't mean the Packers won't sign guys eventually that are just true depth guys. But they really had 2 targeted guys. They went after him. I'm going to go with my first thing that's going to matter in December. It's going to be the Chiefs signing of Jaylon Moore.
Ooh.
We just haven't talked about Jaylon Moore a lot. And if you're not familiar, Jaylon Moore is an American offensive tackle who comes from this offensive line factory in San Francisco, apparently. And so I think it pairs up nicely with Banks. And he is going to be the favorite to win the AFC's left tackle, period. And I don't know how this is going to go. I actually, if I have all the time in the offseason that I want, I would love to go back and watch some of his starts. I haven't done that, so I'm not going to pretend. Solid pass block ratings, almost every start until the last one, actually against the Rams, I think he struggled, with the 49ers. But obviously the Chiefs really liked his tape. They gave him more guaranteed money, let's say, than Aaron Banks got. He got over $20 million guaranteed for a guy that's barely started in the NFL, played 500 snaps the last 2 years combined, and that's all the experience that is. But they picked a guy who they decided was their number 2 choice behind Ronnie Stanley to be Patrick Mahomes' left tackle. That is a big-time bet. They're also moving, very specifically, their second-round pick from a year ago, Sua Matea, to left guard. So that is a brand new left side of the line. And when I looked at all these moves, like, this actually feels like the one that might be the one that tips the scales for a team, whether they're going to contend for a title, whether they're going to repeat as 15-2 type of team, or whether they struggled. The Jaylon Moore signing, I don't know how it's going to go, but I think it's going to matter.
It will absolutely matter. I think that's a great pick, Greg, because it could be either or in this case. We'll know by December,
right?
Whether it will actually help lift them into maybe not winning by such narrow margins that are statistically improbable year over year. What I also think is that you really have to show your work early if you're the Chiefs with this new left side, because teams will smell blood in the water at this point. They saw how hassled Pat Mahomes was how much shuffling they had to do along that offensive line, playing one of their best linemen out of position where he struggled. And I think that this is absolutely going to matter, because the Chiefs always matter that time of year. They're always a threat that time of year. And if this works, it could really, really work. I also think that they're going to continue to restock in the draft. There might be some troubleshooting going on with some of their talent identification processes because their last couple guys have just not worked out, the left tackle spot especially. And so I think that that's going to be something to look at as well internally.
Well, they better get this right. Yeah, if I had wanted to be a little more negative, I could have said it mattered. The core players that they lost, they're among the teams, I think, that lost the most amount of important players. Tooney, Justin Reed, Travell Wharton, Derek Nottie just signed with the Jets, solid player. Menahu is still a free agent. Wouldn't be surprised if they bring him back. But I wanted to be a little more positive. I'm going to trust their system and their evaluation. Overall, they've done pretty well in the offensive line. All right, give me another one.
I think it will matter in December that the Lions re-signed Levi Onwuzurike to a 1-year, $5.5 million deal. The reason I think it will matter specifically in December is because we don't know how long Aiden Hutchinson's return, not just to play, but return to performance. So his actual level of play, we don't know how long it will take. If it does take into the season, by around that time, it's going to really be a factor that a dynamic and ascending young defensive lineman who has not really been able to put it fully together since he was drafted, but really showed some positive flashes last season and was moved all over in their D-line chaos because of all the injuries that they had, that he and Aiden Hutchinson have this rapport and this tandem as someone on the inside who can disrupt and call attention, and somebody who can free up Aiden Hutchinson to cook the way we know he can, and vice versa. And I also think that it's interesting because this is a potential signing. This is like a prove it deal that the Lions have done with Onwuzurike. The 1.5 sacks last season are a false flag in my opinion, because he had a 9.7% pressure rate, which was higher than both Deshaun Wharton and Javon Kinlaw, both of whom got paid much more than he did. So this is sort of a prove it deal where they clearly want to see what this pairing is going to look like. By December, we'll know.
Right. And they've seen the process that Onwuzurike has gone through to get healthy. They've had him in the building, the improvement that he's made. I think he's one of Dan Campbell's guy. That's a good shout out. And yet they would have been a logical team to me for an Ojulari. Or
I agree. I think they set themselves up to draft.
Right. I agree with that, but they really don't have any edge players, like true edge, like speed around the edge other than Hutchinson. I mean, they have Marcus Davenport. I guess that's similar where you're just hoping he can stay healthy, and that's a high ceiling. But it's a very thin position, and there were a lot of guys out there, and I don't really see anyone out there. Like the first 15 names I wrote down, I'm looking at my initial like position list for edges. They're all gone from free agency, which is crazy that they do not last.
If the Brad Holmes Lions look at the defensive line anyway, like the Brad Holmes Rams looked at the defensive line, it's all a big mathematical equation, right? Which is why I think they've cleared the runway by making this signing for just 1 year and low stakes signing that could be very, very high upside. I think that they are looking at this mathematically and like, okay, we have cleared the path now to plug in a like twitchy traits guy, a speed rush guy that we can identify in the draft. We don't have to worry about, A plus B in Levi and Aiden Hutchinson because they understand if at their apex how those traits would complement each other into that equation. They're only looking for C now.
And they're huge. I mean, they have DJ Reader coming back. They have Aleem McNeil. They signed Roy Lopez, who's an interior guy. They have a lot of bulk, and I can almost hear the Lions fans saying, what about Josh Pascal? He was a second-round pick. He hasn't really done much. But I'm thinking like a bend the edge guy. They definitely need that. But that's a good shout-out. They love to have tons of different types of guys. They have a lot of dudes up front, hoping that it works. I'm going to go with a guy at a position for the Houston Texans where they don't have a lot of dudes, and that's wide receiver Christian Kirk. Not only did they free up some cap space by when they brought him in, they actually used him as a bank immediately, and I think that was part of the strategy. They immediately converted his entire salary to a signing bonus. They decided, I'm not going to extend you. We're not betting on you long term, but yeah, like we're going to take your $13 million base salary and like turn that into cap space right away. So that's a nice little bonus.
I love when players arrive. I love when this happens, when players arrive on the roster and like the player wins because he gets a lot of money immediately, but like it's almost like a laundering operation on the backside of the contract.
It is weird. I'm surprised the Saints don't do more of this. Yeah, you bring in a player specifically to open up cap space, but he's on a 1-year deal. He's a number 2 right now for them. Is he best used as a true 2? Probably not. I think they need another receiver there, and it wouldn't surprise me if they either bring in another veteran or invest in that position in the draft. They've been connected in a lot of mock drafts to Mika Ibuka from Ohio State, so they could add a young player there too. To me, he's more of a 2/3, but either way, they needed someone that really contributes. And for this exercise, I tended to go towards the better teams because the better teams, they matter in December, and they're going to need Christian Kirk to matter. And I'm curious how you think, and I'm putting you on the spot again, how he fits into a Nick Caley type of offense, Christian Kirk.
Well, I'm curious with Nick Caley. I'm curious how much Patriots he's going to be, how much get the ball out super fast and, worry maybe less about the status of the players up front and more about, technical execution and also getting the ball out very fast to help alleviate some of that. And I think that get open fast, get open quickly receivers will thrive if that's the direction they go in. I'm curious about how much Rams influence is going to be with Nick Caley with this offense. I don't necessarily see that he's going to have like the blocking help that maybe the Rams have prioritized in their receivers for the last, especially some of the guys coming back from injuries, the physicality, the size. And such,
Christian Kirk's not that guy. I mean, he's tall, but
also the other guys coming back, from injuries and all of that, like and a little bit more diminutive size difference there. I just don't know. That sort of tells me he's going to gravitate a little bit more toward Patriots, which means to me Christian Kirk will be a nice fit because get open fast.
And a slot guy who can stretch the field, which I think is a nice compliment with Nico Collins, where they're both versatile. I just think he's really important. Of all the guys that changed teams in the last month, to me, he was a little under the radar. It's just going to be a really important figure for them, and both sides, kind of like the Stephon Diggs deal a year ago, really should be motivated to bring the best out of each other. The difference with Kirk is he's still young. He's a 28-year-old player, so I know he's had some injuries, but he should be fully recovered. That's going to be a good one. Let's go to your third.
My third is the Chargers adding Najee Harris will matter in December.
Oh,
I love this signing for the Chargers. He is mentally and physically tough with some blocking. He can really wear on a defense. He is physical. He is powerful. He does not miss time due to injuries. He's not missed one game to injury in his career to date. Despite his physical running styles, 4 consecutive 1,000+ rushing yards seasons. And we know Jim Harbaugh wants to run the ball. And last year we were like, okay, we get it. It's cute. We
not really working.
We see the vision, the execution, production is not quite there. And a running back cannot like magically by himself heal an offensive line. But I think this is where you see the projection of focus going and like, okay, let's really make this what we believe that it should have been, that it can be. And I think Jim Harbaugh will especially want to run the ball in December and January if the Chargers get into the postseason again. And they're also going to be on the road and outside twice in tough environments, possibly very cold, depending on the timing in their own division. So I think that this is going to matter in December, Najee Harris being on the roster.
I agree. He will be the centerpiece of a few late season Thursday night or Monday night games. They don't always give the Chargers Sunday night, but maybe if it's the Chiefs, I can see that. And you add Mekhi Becton, you might be moving Zion Johnson to center. I think they'll do a little more work there, but they're trying to improve the running game in multiple ways. I'm going to go with a coaching hire.
Oh,
Justin Frye, offensive line coach.
Whoa.
This is going to matter. He was obviously the offensive line coach for the national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, and they had a ton of injuries, and people thought he coached them up well. He coached Paris Campbell at Ohio State, who is now the entrenched left tackle of the Arizona Cardinals, so there's a relationship there. He was with Chip. You know, he's been with some NFL types, obviously at Ohio State. And to me, the fact that they lost Clayton Adams, and so this is a combination. I think both these things will matter. I don't know how, I'm just dorking out here, that this working is really important for the Cardinals, because here's what the Cardinals haven't done this offseason. Add anyone to their offense. They didn't need to on some level because they had incredible continuity. Here's also what they haven't done, like lose anyone that really mattered to them on their offense. It's the same group back, but you did lose a guy that very highly thought of in Clayton Adams, who was kind of the run game coordinator and the offensive line coach. And now you bring in a different guy, and their running game is going to be so central to what they do. Nick Shook is always talking about it. And so it's another one where I don't know how it's going to go, but to me, it really, really matters. And it obviously matters for the Cowboys as well, because you're trusting that vision, Clayton Adams going over there, while you downgrade at running back with Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. Probably add someone in the draft, like no wide receiver too. So it's two spots, offensive line coach carousel. It matters.
The ripple effect.
Yes.
Huge. Yeah, I agree. He has a great reputation too.
He does.
Josh Simmons, I believe, was just out there last month at the Combine talking about like what a huge impact that Justin Frye has had on his career, saying he's extremely technically gifted, extremely technically aware, and really gives them their mechanics. So
we're getting deep here.
I think that's
it's in
important.
March. We're talking offensive line
coaches. You said
coaches.
Justin Frye, and I did a quick Google, I will say. I did a quick Google search. Looks, he that came up. So I'm like going on the fly here with the Justin Frye take.
I mean, you don't need to have a major take. It's just something to watch. Just their running game.
It does matter.
I think I thought about it because I just looked how, man, they have the most continuity. They have the least amount of change except for that one position. And the running game is so important to what they do with Kyler. It's a big year. Also, I like that the Bears and Ben Johnson interviewed him. I know they didn't end up hiring him, but I just think like he's clearly got a good reputation among these forward-thinking coaches. All right, wrap it up. Let's get out of here.
Yes. Okay. So this is going to be the first time I've really talked about the Los Angeles Rams this offseason. I know that there's a small percentage of our listeners that get very annoyed when I do talk about the Los Angeles Rams, but I think they're going to matter in December and January. And I think all of the moves they've made in free agency so far, starting with getting Matthew Stafford back for at least another year, set off their A-plus plan of really actually they're going to make a run this year. Like I could say that definitively. They are going to try to go for a Super Bowl this season. And of all their signings and the flashy ones and the important ones and the ones that make a lot of sense, Poona Ford signing with the Rams is what is going to matter the most in December. Last year, the Rams were among the worst teams in the NFL in defending the run. Throughout the year, starting with the season opening loss to Detroit and Ben Johnson, who ran it down their throat in overtime, didn't even give Matthew Stafford a chance to touch the ball. After the Eagles put up 300 single-game rushing yards on the Rams in one game at the end of November, in December, the Rams allowed nearly an average of nearly 100 rushing yards per game. In the playoffs, they allowed 106 and 285 rushing yards, respectively. Poona Ford is one of the NFL's best run defenders. Last season, in a defense that does like to schematically play their fronts, similarly to how the Rams like to play their fronts, keep the safeties back deep. The second the Rams were able to keep Matthew Stafford, Poona Ford became one of their priorities to get in the building to sign. Poona Ford and Devontae Adams were their priority free agent targets. And he was signed to get in the way and stay in the way and carry this young ascending defensive line into their pass rush plan on the early downs and into December and January.
Love the glow up for Poona Ford after last year making, I think, just $1 million or $2 million from the Chargers to get a nice raise. Always been kind of a hipster favorite among the film watching community, and now he's a Rams favorite. I love that. Nose tackles. They're kind of back. I don't know why I said that so weird, but
they are so back.
Like two gapping guy in these systems where you don't want to have a lot of guys up front. Yeah, they're making it happen. And then I didn't have a
They're making it gapping. Am I right?
Oh wow. I was looking for my fourth one. It was a stretch. It was a stretch. I didn't think it was that interesting. Some of the ones I was coming up with was like Jets defense lost some people. It's like the Colts offensive line lost some people. And then I thought, like, let's be real. What actually mattered in terms of all these transactions more than any other? You're talking the Rams. I'm talking Geno. I'll be quick about it. But just the Raiders are a relevant team again. They will be a relevant team in December. I'll at least say that they're going to be relevant and watchable. The Raiders, in their long history, have never been more boring than they were in 2024. They were forgettable. That's the last thing you want out of the Raiders. If nothing else, Pete Carroll and having a legitimate starting quarterback is going to make them watchable, make them earning those national window games that they always get, regardless if they're good or not. And I think they're at least going to be in the mix. So that is a franchise-changing move to bring in a quarterback to go with your new head coach. So, of course, that's the one.
I agree. I've been kind of giving the Raiders some praise since they hired John Spytek, who went about making Steven very, very happy. Your personal trainer.
My trainer.
Who apparently you have.
Got in an extra day on Monday. Had some free time.
Nice. Shred, Greg. Shred.
I mean,
He's grinding film and lifting weights. Who are you, Nick Shook?
It's been a slow recovery. It's been a rough month. Not a lot of shredding going on.
I just love it. You could see the presence when John Spytek and Pete Carroll walked into that little section of film and TV sets in Indianapolis in the silver and black. There was this presence there, both of them together. They had this like gravitas, this like, oh yeah, we know ball.
Right, they matter. They matter.
They'll be fun. I think, and Geno, and I had to convince you on this, by the way. I was texting you about this when I was like, I love this for Geno. I love this for Geno. I love that he's going to get paid. I love that he's going to a team that I think is closer than a lot of other people think to actually competing, because it's almost like Pete Carroll will like will it to be so.
I hope so. On paper, the depth chart still has some issues on both sides of the ball.
Sure.
But football's not played that way. Year after year, we think one thing, and I'm with you. When I thought matter, like the Raiders matter again, they got a quarterback, they got a coach. Let's get out of here. We will be back. If you have this feed, you're going to get 40s and free agents next on your feed. We'll be talking with Daniel Jeremiah about mock draft. We got an NFL Daily coming up later this week. Thank you, Jourdan.
You're so welcome. Hey, you know what will matter in December?
What?
Our friendship.
Yes, that is back. You know who else is back? Nose tackles. When nose tackles are back, football is back.